Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, where we explore timeless literature over a warm cup of your favorite brew. Today, you've chosen George Orwell's 1984, a decision that sets you apart. In a world where it's easy to get lost in endless scrolling or to fall down the rabbit holes of binge-watching, you've chosen to invest your time learning and growing. This choice speaks volumes about your curiosity and desire to understand the world more deeply. 1984 is an extraordinary journey into a dystopian society that feels eerily relevant even decades after it was written. It's a story about power, control, and the fragility of truth. Bill Gates himself has recommended this book as essential reading, highlighting its profound insights into our world. As for George Orwell, he was an astute observer of society, driven by his experiences of war, politics, and personal struggles with poverty. His work on 1984 was shaped by the political climate of the early 20th century and his own fears of totalitarianism. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. Fear and freedom clash in a dystopia. George Orwell, born Eric Arthur Blair, transformed his experiences of war, poverty, and political turbulence into compelling narratives. His insights were deeply rooted in his life as an officer in Burma, fighting against totalitarian regimes in Spain, and living through the societal shifts of early 20th century Europe. Orwell's personal encounters with the harsh realities of political oppression and his passion for truth-telling culminated in the creation of 1984, a novel that sought to warn and awaken. Picture this. You're settling into your favorite coffee shop, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most chilling fictional worlds ever created, yet one that feels unnervingly familiar when we look around at our own world today. George Orwell's Oceania isn't just a backdrop for a story. It's a masterclass in how power corrupts absolutely, and how freedom can slip away so gradually that we barely notice until it's gone. Oceania is one of 3 superstates that have carved up the world between them, locked in perpetual warfare with Eurasia and Eastasia. But here's where Orwell's genius really shines. The war isn't really about winning. It's about control. Think about this for a moment. When a society is constantly at war, what happens to dissent? What happens to questions about why resources are scarce or why freedoms are curtailed? The war becomes the ultimate excuse, the perfect smokescreen for oppression. Sound familiar? We've seen this playbook used throughout history, from ancient Rome's bread and circuses to modern nations rallying around conflicts to distract from domestic problems. At the heart of Oceania sits Big Brother, the face that watches from every poster, every screen, every corner of public life. Now, Big Brother might not even be real. He could be a complete fabrication, a symbol created by the party to give people something to love and fear simultaneously. But that's the brilliant horror of it. It doesn't matter if he's real. What matters is that everyone believes in him, everyone feels his presence. It's like having an invisible parent who never stops watching, never stops judging. We carry that feeling with us everywhere we go. And speaking of watching, let's talk about those telescreens. These aren't just televisions. They're two-way mirrors into your soul. They broadcast propaganda while simultaneously monitoring your every move, your every expression, even your sleep. Orwell wrote this in 1948, decades before smartphones and social media, yet doesn't this feel eerily prescient? We carry devices that track our location, monitor our conversations, analyze our behavior patterns, and serve us targeted content based on our psychological profiles. The difference is we've chosen to carry Big Brother in our pockets, and we've done it willingly, even enthusiastically. The party has divided society into 3 distinct classes, and this hierarchy is crucial to understanding how Oceania functions. At the top, you have the inner party, about 2% of the population who enjoy relative luxury and wield real power. These are the architects of oppression, the ones who know the system is built on lies but perpetuate it anyway because it serves their interests. Below them sits the outer party, perhaps 13% of the population, and these are the middle managers of tyranny. They have just enough privilege to feel superior to the masses, but they live in constant fear of demotion or elimination. They're the perfect enforcers because they have something to lose. Then there are the proles, the proletariat, making up about 85% of the population. Here's where Orwell reveals something profound about power. The party barely bothers to monitor the proles because they're kept deliberately ignorant and distracted. They're fed a steady diet of entertainment, alcohol, and lottery tickets. As long as they're not thinking critically about their condition, they pose no threat. The party's slogan about the proles is chillingly simple. Proles and animals are free. Free because they're considered incapable of rebellion, like livestock that doesn't need to be watched because it doesn't know it's trapped. This brings us to one of Oceania's most insidious features, the systematic destruction of truth itself. The Ministry of Truth works around the clock to rewrite history, making it conform to whatever the party needs it to say today. Documents are altered, photographs are doctored, inconvenient people are erased from existence entirely. It's not enough for the party to control the present. They must control the past to control the future. When you can't trust your own memories, when yesterday's truth becomes today's heresy, how do you maintain any sense of reality? We see echoes of this in our own digital age, don't we? Information can be manipulated, deep fakes can make anyone appear to say anything, and social media algorithms can create entirely different versions of reality for different groups of people. We're living through an era where the very concept of objective truth is under assault, where facts are increasingly treated as matters of opinion. The geography of Oceania itself tells a story. London, where our protagonist Winston lives, has been renamed Airstrip 1, reducing this historic city to nothing more than a military outpost. The renaming isn't accidental. It strips away cultural memory, historical connection, and personal identity. When you erase the names of places, you erase the stories they tell, the meaning they hold for people. What makes Oceania so terrifying isn't that it's completely alien to our experience. It's that we can see how a society might slide into this state gradually, through a series of small compromises and reasonable-sounding justifications. Emergency powers that never get rescinded, surveillance measures implemented for our own safety, the gradual erosion of privacy in the name of security. Orwell shows us that totalitarianism doesn't arrive with jackboots and dramatic speeches. It arrives quietly, bureaucratically, with forms to fill out and procedures to follow. As we dive deeper into Winston's world, keep this question in your mind. How much freedom would you trade for security? How much privacy for convenience? How much truth for comfort? Because Oceania isn't just Orwell's imagination. It's a warning about the world we might create if we're not careful. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop, watching people scroll through their phones, and you notice something unsettling. Everyone's looking at the same news, the same posts, almost like they're all seeing the world through the same lens. Now imagine if that lens wasn't just suggested to you by an algorithm, but forced upon you by a government that controlled every piece of information you could access. Welcome to Winston Smith's world, and honestly, it might feel more familiar than we'd like to admit. Winston Smith isn't your typical hero. When Orwell introduces us to this 39-year-old man living in what was once London, we meet someone who's simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. He works at the Ministry of Truth, which, in the twisted logic of his world, is actually the Ministry of Lies. His job, rewriting history. Every day, Winston sits at his desk and literally changes the past to match whatever the party needs people to believe today. Think about that for a moment. Imagine if your job was to go back and edit yesterday's news to make today's contradictions disappear. What makes Winston fascinating is that he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not some naive bureaucrat mindlessly following orders. He understands that when he changes a newspaper article from 1973 to say that chocolate rations increased when they actually decreased, he's participating in the destruction of truth itself. And this knowledge is eating him alive from the inside. Here's where Winston becomes truly relatable to our modern experience. Haven't we all had moments where we've had to smile and nod while someone in authority says something we know isn't true? Maybe it's in a workplace meeting where everyone pretends the budget cuts are actually exciting new opportunities for efficiency. Maybe it's watching a politician claim they never said something you clearly remember them saying last week. Winston lives in the extreme version of this cognitive dissonance, where questioning the official narrative isn't just career suicide, it's actual suicide. The inner conflict that defines Winston is this constant battle between what he knows to be true and what he must pretend to believe. Orwell gives us this beautiful, terrifying concept called doublethink, which is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs in your mind simultaneously and accept both of them. Winston is supposed to be a master of doublethink, but here's his problem. He remembers too much. He remembers when things were different. He remembers his mother, his childhood, fragments of a world before Big Brother, and these memories make him dangerous. Now think about this in terms of our own lives. How often do we practice our own forms of doublethink? We know social media is designed to be addictive and manipulate our emotions, yet we keep scrolling. We understand that constant connectivity is affecting our mental health, but we can't put our phones down. We're aware that our data is being harvested and sold, but we click accept on those terms and conditions without reading them. Winston's struggle with doublethink isn't some distant dystopian concept. It's a daily reality we all navigate. What makes Winston's character so compelling is his quiet rebellion. He doesn't start as a revolutionary with grand plans to overthrow the system. Instead, his resistance begins with something almost pathetically small. He buys a diary. In a world where even thinking rebellious thoughts is a crime called thought crime, Winston commits his first act of defiance by writing down his true feelings. The simple act of writing, "Down with Big Brother," becomes an act of tremendous courage. This is where Orwell's genius shines through Winston's character. The author understood that totalitarian systems don't just control what you do, they aim to control what you think and feel. Winston's real rebellion isn't political action. It's the insistence on maintaining his inner life, his private thoughts, his individual perspective on reality. When he looks out his window and sees a prole woman hanging laundry and singing, he experiences a moment of genuine human connection that the party can't manufacture or control. The tragedy of Winston Smith is that he's fighting a battle he knows he can't win. Unlike heroes in other stories who have some chance of victory, Winston is fully aware that the party always wins in the end. He knows that eventually they'll catch him, break him, and make him love Big Brother. Yet he continues his small acts of rebellion anyway. There's something profoundly human about this hopeless resistance, this insistence on being true to yourself even when you know it will destroy you. Winston represents all of us when we're caught between our authentic selves and the roles society demands we play. He's every person who's ever felt like they're living a lie, every individual who's questioned whether they're going crazy or if the world around them has lost its mind. In our age of alternative facts and information warfare, Winston's struggle to hold onto objective truth feels remarkably contemporary. As we dive deeper into Winston's story, we'll see how his small rebellions grow into something larger, more dangerous, and ultimately more tragic. But for now, remember that Winston Smith starts as someone not unlike ourselves, a person trying to maintain their humanity in a world that seems designed to strip it away, one small compromise at a time. His journey reminds us that sometimes the most radical act is simply refusing to forget who you really are. Picture yourself settling into your favorite coffee shop, steam rising from your mug, when suddenly you notice something unsettling. The barista seems to be watching you a little too intently. The person at the next table glances up from their laptop whenever you shift in your seat. That security camera in the corner appears to be angled directly at your table. Now imagine that feeling never goes away, that it follows you home, into your bedroom, into your very thoughts. Welcome to the world of the thought police in George Orwell's 1984, where surveillance isn't just about watching what you do, but controlling what you think. When Orwell wrote about the thought police, he wasn't just creating a fictional boogeyman for his dystopian world. He was holding up a mirror to show us what happens when surveillance becomes so pervasive, so invasive, that it transforms the very nature of human consciousness. The thought police represent the ultimate expression of totalitarian control, an organization that doesn't just punish crimes after they happen, but seeks to eliminate the possibility of crime by monitoring and reshaping human thought itself. Think about this for a moment. In Winston Smith's world, there's no such thing as a private moment. The telescreens watch constantly, microphones pick up whispered conversations, and neighbors report suspicious behavior. But here's what makes the thought police truly terrifying. They don't just watch your actions, they claim to read your mind. They look for what Orwell calls thought crime, the mere act of thinking rebellious thoughts, even if you never act on them. It's like having a police force that can arrest you for your dreams. The genius of Orwell's concept lies in how he shows us that this kind of surveillance doesn't just catch criminals, it creates them. When you know you're being watched constantly, when you understand that even your facial expressions are being analyzed for signs of disloyalty, something fundamental changes in how you relate to your own thoughts. Winston learns to practice what he calls doublethink, the ability to hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously, to believe whatever the party needs him to believe at any given moment. Now you might be thinking, that's just science fiction that could never happen in real life. But consider how much of your daily life is already under surveillance. Your phone tracks your location constantly. Your internet searches are recorded and analyzed. Your credit card purchases paint a detailed picture of your habits and preferences. Security cameras capture your movements through public spaces. Social media algorithms know what makes you angry, what makes you happy, what keeps you scrolling late into the night. The difference between our world and Winston's isn't necessarily the presence or absence of surveillance, it's the purpose behind it and the degree of control it enables. The thought police don't just collect data, they use it to reshape reality itself. They practice what Orwell calls reality control, the power to make people believe that 2 + 2 = 5 if the party says it does. Here's where it gets really chilling. The thought police understand something profound about human psychology. Most people don't want to be rebels. Most people want to fit in to be accepted, to avoid conflict. So the mere knowledge that you're being watched, that your thoughts might be judged and punished, is often enough to make you police yourself. You start editing your thoughts before you even think them. You become your own thought police. Orwell shows us this process through Winston's relationship with his diary, one of the few places where he initially feels free to express his true thoughts. But even there, he's haunted by the knowledge that discovery would mean death. The diary becomes both an act of rebellion and a source of terror. Every word he writes could be evidence against him. This is the psychological warfare of the thought police. They don't need to catch everyone, they just need everyone to believe they might be caught. The most insidious aspect of the thought police is how they use love and trust as weapons. They turn children against parents, lovers against each other, friends into informants. They understand that the deepest human connections are also our greatest vulnerabilities. When you can't trust the people closest to you, when even intimate moments might be performances for hidden observers, the very foundation of human society begins to crumble. But here's what Orwell really wants us to understand. The thought police succeed not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the gradual erosion of our belief in objective truth. They convince people that reality is whatever the party says it is, That independent thought is not just dangerous but impossible. They don't just want obedience, they want genuine belief. As we navigate our own age of digital surveillance and information warfare, Orwell's vision of the thought police feels less like distant fiction and more like a warning we should have heeded. The question isn't whether we have the technology for thought control, it's whether we have the wisdom to resist it. Every time we allow convenience to override privacy, every time we accept that our data will be collected for our own good, every time we let algorithms decide what information we see, we take another step toward a world where our thoughts might not entirely be our own. The thought police remind us that freedom isn't just about what we're allowed to do, it's about what we're allowed to think, to question, to doubt. And that's a freedom worth protecting, one thought at a time. You know, there's something deeply unsettling about the way Winston Smith sits at his desk in the Ministry of Truth, methodically rewriting history. But what's even more chilling is how Orwell shows us that controlling the past isn't enough for totalitarian power. No, the real masterpiece of control lies in something far more insidious: the systematic destruction of language itself and the human mind's capacity for independent thought. Picture this for a moment. You wake up tomorrow and half the words you know simply don't exist anymore. Not just forgotten, but literally erased from every dictionary, every book, every conversation. How would you express complex ideas about freedom, justice, or love if the very words to describe these concepts had vanished? This isn't science fiction anymore, my friend. This is Newspeak, and it's Orwell's most terrifying prediction about how power maintains itself. Newspeak operates on a brilliantly simple principle: if you can't think it, you can't rebel against it. The party in 1984 doesn't just want to control what people do or say, they want to make it literally impossible to conceive of resistance. Think about this. Every year the Newspeak dictionary gets smaller, not larger. Words like freedom get reduced to meaning only freedom from lice, or this field is free from weeds. The political concept of freedom. That simply ceases to exist in the language. Now you might be thinking, come on, that's just a book. People would never let that happen. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. We're already seeing echoes of this in our own world. Consider how certain terms get redefined in political discourse until they mean the opposite of what they originally meant. When fake news can mean both actual misinformation and any news someone disagrees with, we're witnessing the weaponization of language in real time. When literally now also means figuratively. We're seeing how language naturally evolves, yes, but also how meaning can become fluid and manipulable. The genius of Newspeak isn't just in removing words, it's in the precision of what remains. Orwell shows us how the party creates terms like goodthink and crimethink, not to expand expression, but to compress all political thought into simple binary categories. You're either thinking correctly or you're thinking criminally. There's no middle ground, no nuance, no space for the kind of complex reasoning that might lead someone to question authority. But Newspeak is only half of Orwell's linguistic nightmare. The other half is doublethink, and this is where things get really psychological. Doublethink is the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and accept both of them. It's not just hypocrisy. It's the deliberate fracturing of logical thought itself. Imagine being able to genuinely believe that war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Not just saying these things, but actually believing them while simultaneously knowing they're false. The party member practicing doublethink isn't lying in the conventional sense because they've transcended the very concept of truth and falsehood. They believe whatever the party needs them to believe at any given moment, and they believe it completely. Here's what makes doublethink so insidious. It's presented as a form of mental discipline, almost like a spiritual practice. Party members are taught that the ability to hold contradictory thoughts is a sign of intellectual sophistication, not weakness. They're told that objective reality is a bourgeois concept, that truth is whatever the party says it is. And the scary part, once you start down this path, it becomes easier and easier to justify anything. We see glimpses of doublethink in our own world when people simultaneously demand both complete privacy from government surveillance and total security from terrorist threats, without acknowledging the inherent tension. We see it when we celebrate both rugged individualism and demand that society take care of us. Now, I'm not saying these are necessarily wrong positions to hold, but notice how we rarely grapple with the contradictions. We've learned to compartmentalize in ways that would make Winston Smith's colleagues proud. The most chilling example in 1984 comes when Winston watches a party member give a speech that seamlessly transitions from being at war with Eurasia to being at war with Eastasia, without missing a beat. The speaker doesn't stumble, doesn't acknowledge the change, and the audience accepts it completely. They've been trained to forget what they believed 5 minutes ago and embrace the new truth with genuine conviction. What Orwell understood, and what we're still grappling with today, is that controlling information isn't enough. You have to control the very mechanisms of thought itself. Social media algorithms that create echo chambers, news sources that present opinion as fact, political rhetoric that makes every issue a crisis requiring immediate, unthinking loyalty. These aren't accidents. They're features of a system that benefits when people stop thinking critically. The antidote to Newspeak and Doublethink isn't just education or access to information. It's the cultivation of intellectual humility, the willingness to sit with uncertainty, and the courage to notice when our own thoughts don't quite add up. It's asking ourselves the uncomfortable questions. What do I believe that might be wrong? When am I practicing my own version of doublethink? How has my language been shaped by forces I might not even recognize? As we move forward into our exploration of Winston's world, keep this linguistic manipulation in mind. It's not just background detail in Orwell's dystopia. It's the very foundation that makes everything else possible. Picture yourself settling into your favorite coffee shop chair, steam rising from your mug, as we dive into one of the most chilling yet brilliant aspects of Orwell's masterpiece. We've already explored Winston's world, and now we need to understand the machine that controls it all. Today, we're examining the party and its enigmatic figurehead, Big Brother. And trust me, once you understand how this system works, you'll start seeing its fingerprints everywhere in our modern world. Let's start with Big Brother himself, shall we? Now, here's the fascinating thing about Big Brother. He might not even exist as a real person. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful figure in Oceania, whose face appears on every poster, whose eyes follow you from every screen, might be nothing more than a carefully constructed fiction. Orwell presents him as this omnipresent father figure, with that distinctive black mustache and those penetrating eyes that seem to look directly into your soul. But here's where it gets really clever. It doesn't matter whether he's real or not. His power comes from the idea of him, from the belief that he's watching, caring, protecting, and yes, punishing when necessary. Consider how this works in practice. Have you ever noticed how certain public figures become larger than life, almost mythical? Think about how some political leaders or corporate CEOs are portrayed, not just as people, but as symbols, as brands unto themselves. Their actual human qualities become secondary to the image, the idea they represent. Big Brother takes this to its logical extreme. He's the ultimate brand, the perfect leader who never ages, never makes mistakes, never shows weakness, because he exists primarily in the realm of propaganda and perception. The party itself operates on 3 distinct levels, and understanding this hierarchy is crucial to grasping how totalitarian control actually functions. At the top, you have the inner party. Think of them as the true believers, the architects of power. These are the people who might actually know that Big Brother is a construction, who understand the mechanisms of control they're operating. They represent maybe 2% of the population, living in luxury while orchestrating the oppression of everyone else. Then there's the outer party where our protagonist Winston belongs. These are the middle managers of tyranny, if you will. They're educated enough to do the technical work of running the state, rewriting history, managing the telescreens, operating the surveillance apparatus. But they're also the most watched, the most controlled. Now, think about this. Why would the inner party keep the outer party under such tight surveillance? Because knowledge is dangerous. These people know enough to be useful, but also enough to be threatening. They're like the IT department of a corrupt corporation. They have access to the systems, but they're monitored constantly to ensure they don't use that access against their employers. At the bottom, comprising about 85% of the population, are the proles, the proletariat. Here's where Orwell reveals something profound about power structures. The party largely ignores the proles, allowing them relative freedom in their personal lives. They can drink, fight, gamble, even think relatively freely, because the party has determined they're not capable of organized resistance. There's a chilling line in the novel: proles and animals are free. The party sees them as barely human, incapable of the sustained intellectual effort required for revolution. But here's what makes this system so insidious. It's not just about surveillance and punishment. The party has mastered something far more powerful: the manipulation of reality itself. Through the Ministry of Truth, they don't just suppress dissent, they make dissent literally unthinkable. When you control language through Newspeak, when you constantly rewrite history, when you make people doubt their own memories and perceptions, you don't need to fear rebellion, because rebellion becomes conceptually impossible. Consider how this parallels our modern information landscape. We live in an age where different groups can look at the same event and see completely different realities, where algorithms curate our news feeds to show us information that confirms what we already believe, where the very concept of objective truth has become politicized. Now, I'm not saying we're living in 1984. We're not. But the mechanisms Orwell described for controlling information and perception are remarkably prescient. The genius of the party's system lies in its understanding of human psychology. They know that humans need to belong, need to believe in something larger than themselves. So they provide that through the party itself, through the ritual of the 2 minutes hate, through the constant war against shifting enemies. They give people something to love, Big Brother, and something to hate, Emmanuel Goldstein and whatever enemy they're fighting this week. What's particularly unsettling is how the party has made independent thought not just dangerous, but genuinely difficult. When Winston tries to remember what life was like before the revolution, he finds his memories unreliable, possibly altered by years of propaganda. The party hasn't just changed the present and future, they've colonized the past itself. As we prepare to delve deeper into the specific mechanisms of control, the telescreens, the thought police, the ingenious torture methods of Room 101, keep this foundation in mind. The party and Big Brother represent the perfection of authoritarian control, a system that doesn't just demand obedience but makes disobedience psychologically and intellectually impossible. It's a chilling vision, but one that helps us recognize and resist the subtler forms of manipulation we encounter in our own world, where the battle for our attention, our data, and ultimately our autonomy continues in ways Orwell could hardly have imagined. You know, there's something almost magical about the moment when Winston first encounters Julia in Orwell's masterpiece. We've been following this broken man through the gray corridors of his existence, watching him struggle with his forbidden thoughts and his growing hatred of the party. And then, like a crack of lightning in an endless storm, Julia appears. But here's what's fascinating about their relationship, and why it matters so much more than just a love story tucked into a dystopian nightmare. Picture this scene with me for a moment. Winston is walking through the ministry corridors when Julia, this young woman from the fiction department, suddenly stumbles and falls right in front of him. As he helps her up, she slips him a note. Just a simple piece of paper, but when Winston finally gets the chance to read it, those 3 words change everything. I love you. Now think about this. In a world where even your facial expressions are monitored, where the slightest hint of independent thought can get you vaporized, this young woman has just committed the ultimate act of rebellion. She's chosen love over fear. But Julia represents something much deeper than romantic salvation for Winston. She embodies a completely different form of resistance, and understanding this difference is crucial to grasping what Orwell is really telling us about human nature and rebellion itself. Winston's rebellion is intellectual, philosophical. He wants to understand the truth about the past, to preserve memory, to fight the party's control over reality itself. He's like someone today who meticulously fact-checks every news story, who digs through archives to understand what really happened, who refuses to let history be rewritten by those in power. Julia, on the other hand, represents what we might call instinctive rebellion. She doesn't care about the grand theories or the historical truth. She simply refuses to let the party control her body, her desires, her basic human instincts. When she tells Winston about her numerous affairs, about how she's been breaking the party's rules since she was young, she's not doing it out of political conviction. She's doing it because she's fundamentally alive in a way that the party cannot touch. This difference between them creates one of the most powerful dynamics in literature. It's like watching two different types of resistance fighters meet. One is the scholar, carefully documenting atrocities and building cases for truth. The other is the guerrilla, living free despite the occupation, finding joy and humanity in the cracks of oppression. Both are necessary, both are brave, but they approach the fight from completely different angles. Their secret meetings in the room above Mr. Charrington's shop become something sacred, don't they? In this tiny space, they create what amounts to a parallel universe where the party's rules simply don't apply. They drink real coffee, eat real sugar, make love freely, and talk without fear. It's remarkable how Orwell shows us that even in the most totalitarian system imaginable, human beings can carve out these pockets of authenticity. Think about the courage this requires. Every moment they spend together is a death sentence waiting to be discovered. What strikes me most about their relationship is how it illuminates the party's deepest fear. Big Brother isn't just afraid of political opposition or military uprising. The party is terrified of human connection itself, because love creates loyalty that exists outside their control. When Winston loves Julia, he's no longer completely theirs. His heart belongs to someone else, and that's a form of treason that no amount of surveillance can prevent, only punish after the fact. This connects so powerfully to our modern world, doesn't it? Consider how authoritarian movements today still try to control personal relationships, to make people suspicious of their neighbors, their families, even their closest friends. The party understands something fundamental about human nature that we sometimes forget in our digital age. Real intimacy, real love, real trust between individuals is the foundation of all resistance to tyranny. Julia also teaches Winston something crucial about survival under oppression. She's mastered what we might call performative compliance. She enthusiastically participates in party rallies, volunteers for community activities, maintains a perfect facade of loyalty, all while living a completely secret life of rebellion. It's a strategy that many people throughout history have had to adopt. Think about those who lived under Stalin's purges, or citizens in Nazi Germany who helped Jewish families while appearing to be model citizens. But here's where the tragedy begins to unfold, and why their relationship becomes so heartbreaking. The very thing that makes their love revolutionary also makes it vulnerable. Their meetings, their trust, their growing intimacy, all of it is being watched, recorded, analyzed by the thought police. O'Brien, who has been monitoring Winston from the beginning, allows their relationship to flourish precisely because it gives him more evidence, more leverage, more ways to break them both. The cruel genius of the party system is that it doesn't just punish rebellion, it corrupts the very things that make rebellion possible. Love, trust, hope, memory, all of these become weapons that can be turned against you. And as we'll see, the room above Charrington's shop, their sanctuary of freedom, is actually the most surveilled space of all. Their paradise was always an illusion, their freedom always a trap. This sets up the devastating final act of their story. where we'll discover just how completely the party can destroy not just bodies and minds, but the very capacity for the love that once seemed so unbreakable between them. Picture yourself sitting in that dimly lit cafe where we left Winston, still reeling from his encounter with O'Brien. The coffee in your cup has gone cold as we dive deeper into one of the most fascinating and terrifying aspects of Orwell's masterpiece, the Brotherhood, that shadowy resistance movement that may or may not exist, depending on who you ask and when you're brave enough to whisper the question. You know that feeling when you're scrolling through social media and you stumble across a post that makes you think, wait, am I the only one who sees how messed up this is? That's exactly where Winston finds himself, except in his world, that fleeting moment of doubt could literally cost him his life. The Brotherhood represents something we all crave when we feel isolated in our beliefs. The knowledge that we're not alone, that somewhere out there, others see what we see and are willing to fight for what's right. Now, think about this for a moment. In our world, we have countless ways to connect with like-minded people. We have encrypted messaging apps, private forums, and social networks that can organize entire movements overnight. But what happens when the very technology designed to connect us becomes the tool of our surveillance? Winston's world shows us the ultimate evolution of that nightmare scenario, where even thinking the wrong thought can be detected through something called thought crime. The Brotherhood, as O'Brien describes it to Winston and Julia, operates like a ghost in the machine of the party's totalitarian system. It's supposedly led by Emmanuel Goldstein, the eternal enemy of Big Brother, a figure so mythologized that he might as well be a character from a fairy tale. But here's where Orwell's genius really shines through. He makes us question whether the Brotherhood is real or just another layer of the party's psychological manipulation. It's like that urban legend everyone knows someone who experienced, but no one can quite pin down the original source. Consider how this mirrors our modern relationship with conspiracy theories and resistance movements. In an age where disinformation spreads faster than wildfire, how do we distinguish between genuine grassroots resistance and manufactured opposition designed to trap dissidents? Winston's journey into the Brotherhood becomes a masterclass in how authoritarian regimes can use our deepest desires for freedom against us. The recruitment process itself is fascinating and chilling. O'Brien doesn't approach Winston with pamphlets or grand speeches about revolution. Instead, he uses subtle psychological cues, testing Winston's readiness through seemingly innocent conversations about Newspeak and the nature of the past. It's like a dance where both partners are pretending to know the steps while secretly terrified they'll stumble and reveal their true intentions. This gradual seduction into rebellion feels remarkably similar to how people today get drawn into various underground movements, whether political, social, or ideological. What strikes me most about Winston's initiation into the Brotherhood is how O'Brien systematically breaks down his moral boundaries. He asks Winston if he's willing to commit murder, to betray innocent people, to throw acid in a child's face, all in service of bringing down Big Brother. Winston says yes to everything except one thing. He won't agree to separate from Julia. This moment reveals something profound about human nature under extreme oppression. We'll compromise almost any principle, abandon nearly any moral stance, if we believe it serves the greater good of resistance. But here's the terrifying twist that makes your coffee cup rattle against the saucer. What if the Brotherhood is just an elaborate honey trap? What if O'Brien, this charismatic figure who seems to offer Winston everything he's been desperately seeking, is actually working for the very system they're supposedly fighting against? This possibility transforms the entire narrative from a story about resistance into a meditation on how totalitarian systems can weaponize our hope itself. Think about the psychological brilliance of this strategy. Instead of simply crushing dissent through brute force, the party allows potential rebels to reveal themselves through their very desire to rebel. It's like a spider's web that looks like an escape route until you're already trapped in its silken threads. This approach is far more insidious than traditional oppression because it turns our noblest impulses, our courage and moral conviction, into the very tools of our destruction. The Brotherhood also represents something deeper about human nature, our fundamental need to believe that resistance is possible, even when all evidence suggests otherwise. Winston clings to the idea of the Brotherhood not just because he wants to overthrow Big Brother, but because he needs to believe that the human spirit cannot be completely crushed. It's the same impulse that drives people today to support underdogs, to champion lost causes, and to maintain faith in change even when the systems around them seem immovable. As we prepare to follow Winston deeper into this labyrinth of resistance and betrayal, remember that the Brotherhood serves as Orwell's ultimate test of our ability to distinguish between authentic rebellion and manufactured consent. In our next conversation, we'll explore how this tension between hope and manipulation reaches its devastating climax, revealing truths about power, resistance, and human nature that remain as relevant today as they were when Orwell first put pen to paper. The question that will haunt us is simple yet profound. In a world where even our rebellion can be controlled, what does freedom actually mean? So we've journeyed with Winston through his rebellion, his love affair with Julia, and his capture by the thought police. We've seen him tortured, broken down, and seemingly rebuilt in the Ministry of Love. But Orwell isn't done with us yet. There's one final, devastating stop on this journey into the heart of totalitarian control, and it's perhaps the most chilling location in all of literature. Room 101. Picture this moment with me. Winston sits in his cell, already transformed by weeks of torture and psychological manipulation. He's confessed to crimes he never committed, betrayed friends who trusted him, and accepted that 2 + 2 = 5 when the party says so. You might think he's already lost everything that made him human. But O'Brien, his torturer and former friend, has one more lesson to teach him about the true nature of power. Room 101, O'Brien tells him, is the worst thing in the world. Now think about this for a moment. What would be the worst thing in the world for you? We all have that deep primal fear that lives in the darkest corner of our minds. For some, it might be spiders or snakes. For others, it could be drowning or being buried alive. But here's what makes Room 101 so terrifyingly brilliant. It's not the same for everyone. The party has studied Winston so completely, so intimately, that they know exactly what will break him at the deepest level. For Winston Smith, that fear is rats. Not just any discomfort with rodents, but a visceral, paralyzing terror that reaches back to his childhood nightmares. When O'Brien brings out that cage designed to strap over Winston's face, filled with hungry, aggressive rats ready to eat through to his eyes and brain, we witness something that goes beyond mere torture. This is the complete annihilation of the human spirit. But here's where Orwell's genius really shines through, and why this scene haunts readers decades after they've closed the book. Room 101 isn't really about rats or any specific fear. It's about finding that one thing that will make you abandon everything you believe in, everyone you love, everything that makes you who you are. When Winston screams, "Do it to Julia," not me, Julia, he's not just trying to escape physical pain. He's committing the ultimate betrayal of his own humanity. Think about what this means in our modern world. We might not have literal Room 101s, but don't we see versions of this psychological manipulation everywhere? Consider how authoritarian regimes today use family members as leverage against dissidents. Think about how social media platforms can weaponize our personal data, our relationships, our deepest insecurities against us. When a government knows exactly which pressure points will make you comply, when they understand your fears better than you do yourself, how free are you really? There's something almost prophetic about how Orwell understood that the most effective control isn't physical force, but psychological dominance. Modern surveillance capitalism works on similar principles. Companies don't need to torture us to get us to behave exactly as they want. They just need to know us well enough to predict our choices, to nudge us in directions that serve their interests while making us believe we're acting freely. The tragedy of Room 101 is that it reveals how even our most sacred bonds can be weaponized against us. Winston's love for Julia was supposed to be the one pure thing in his life, the final rebellion against the party's total control. But in that moment of absolute terror, even love becomes a tool of oppression. The party doesn't just want to control your actions or even your thoughts. They want to corrupt your capacity for love itself. Now, here's what makes this so relevant to our current moment. We're living in an age where our personal information, our behavioral patterns, our emotional triggers are being cataloged and analyzed on an unprecedented scale. Every click, every purchase, every relationship status update feeds into algorithms designed to predict and influence our behavior. We might not face literal rats, but we face targeted manipulation that exploits our psychological vulnerabilities with surgical precision. But there's another layer to Room 101 that we can't ignore. It's not just about the victim's fear, it's about the complete moral collapse that fear can cause. When Winston betrays Julia, he doesn't just save himself from physical harm. He destroys his own capacity for genuine human connection. This is the party's ultimate victory. They don't just break your will, they make you complicit in breaking your own soul. The most disturbing part of Room 101 is how it forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about ourselves. We all like to believe we'd be heroes under pressure, that we'd never betray our principles or the people we love. But Orwell is asking us a harder question. What if the pressure was perfectly calibrated to your specific breaking point? What if they knew exactly how to make you choose survival over everything else you claim to value? As we move toward the book's devastating conclusion, Room 101 serves as the final proof of the party's complete mastery over human nature. It's not enough to control what people do or say. True totalitarian power means controlling what people are capable of feeling, of believing, of loving. When Winston leaves Room 101, he's no longer the same person who once dared to write "down with Big Brother" in his diary. He's become exactly what the party always intended him to be. A hollow shell of compliance, incapable of genuine rebellion because incapable of genuine love. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone you've admired for years, someone who seems to understand your deepest thoughts and frustrations. They nod knowingly as you share your most dangerous secrets, and for the first time in forever, you feel truly seen. Then, in one horrifying moment, you discover they've been recording every word, every confession, every vulnerable admission. That crushing realization of betrayal is exactly what Winston Smith experiences with O'Brien, and it's perhaps one of the most chilling psychological manipulations ever put to paper. Let me pour us another cup and walk you through this devastating revelation, because O'Brien's betrayal isn't just a plot twist in a dystopian novel. It's a masterclass in how trust can be weaponized against us, and honestly, it feels more relevant today than ever before. When Winston first encounters O'Brien, he's desperate for connection in a world that's systematically isolated him from genuine human contact. Think about how lonely Winston has become. He can't trust his neighbors, his colleagues, even his own diary feels dangerous. Then along comes this sophisticated, seemingly sympathetic figure who appears to share Winston's doubts about the party. O'Brien represents everything Winston craves: intellectual companionship, validation of his forbidden thoughts, and most importantly, hope that resistance is possible. Now, here's where Orwell's genius really shines through. O'Brien doesn't just pretend to be a rebel. He becomes the perfect rebel for Winston specifically. He quotes the exact poetry Winston loves. He expresses precisely the philosophical doubts that torment Winston's mind. And he offers exactly the kind of sophisticated resistance movement that would appeal to Winston's intellectual nature. It's like O'Brien has been studying Winston's psychological profile for years, crafting the perfect bait for this particular fish. Have you ever noticed how the most effective manipulators aren't the obvious ones? They're not the cartoon villains twirling their mustaches. They're the people who make us feel understood, who seem to share our values and validate our deepest concerns. O'Brien embodies this perfectly. He's charming, intelligent, and appears to offer Winston something precious, genuine human connection in a dehumanizing world. The brotherhood that O'Brien describes is everything Winston dreams of, a secret network of thinking people working to overthrow Big Brother. When O'Brien gives Winston that forbidden book by Emmanuel Goldstein, it feels like receiving the keys to the kingdom of truth. Winston devours every word, finally finding the intellectual framework that explains his instinctive rebellion against the party's lies. But here's the devastating irony. Even this moment of apparent enlightenment is orchestrated manipulation. Think about this for a moment. What if the very thing that makes you feel most awake, most aware, most truly yourself, was actually designed to trap you? That's the psychological horror O'Brien represents. He doesn't just betray Winston's trust. He betrays Winston's capacity for hope, for love, for the very human connections that make life worth living. When the truth finally emerges in the Ministry of Love, we discover that O'Brien has been watching Winston for 7 years. 7 years of careful observation, psychological profiling, and strategic manipulation. Every kindness, every moment of seeming understanding, every gesture of rebellion was carefully calculated to draw Winston deeper into the web. O'Brien tells Winston that he helped write the very book that Winston thought represented pure truth and resistance. This kind of long-term psychological manipulation feels disturbingly familiar in our current era, doesn't it? We live in a world where our digital footprints are constantly monitored, where algorithms know our preferences better than we do, where the line between authentic connection and strategic manipulation can become impossibly blurred. Social media platforms study our behaviors to predict and influence our choices. Political operatives use psychological profiling to craft messages that feel personally meaningful to us. The tools of surveillance and manipulation that seemed like science fiction in 1948 are now part of our daily reality. But O'Brien's betrayal goes deeper than just surveillance or political manipulation. He betrays something fundamental about human nature, our need to trust, to connect, to believe that somewhere out there, someone understands us. When O'Brien reveals that he's been Winston's torturer all along, he's not just destroying Winston's political hopes, he's attacking Winston's basic faith in human goodness and authentic connection. The most chilling aspect of O'Brien's character is how he seems to genuinely believe in what he's doing. He's not a reluctant enforcer or a conflicted double agent. He's a true believer who sees his manipulation and torture as necessary work. He tells Winston that the party seeks power for its own sake, that they torture not to extract confessions, but to transform human consciousness itself. O'Brien represents the ultimate corruption of intellectual sophistication, using deep understanding of human psychology not to heal or help, but to control and destroy. As we close this chapter on betrayal and deception, consider how O'Brien's methods echo in our own world. The most effective forms of control often come disguised as liberation. The most dangerous lies are wrapped in appealing truths, and the deepest betrayals come from those we trust most completely. Winston's story reminds us to guard not just our secrets, but our capacity for hope and connection. Because in a world full of O'Briens, sometimes the most radical act is simply maintaining our ability to trust and love authentically. So here we are, settling in with our coffee, about to witness one of the most chilling endings in all of literature. We've followed Winston Smith through his rebellion, his love affair with Julia, his capture, and his horrific time in room 101. Now we're about to see the final, devastating blow that Orwell delivers, not just to Winston, but to our very understanding of what it means to be human. Picture this. Winston is sitting in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, the same place where he once saw the broken shells of former party members who had been through what he's now experienced. But here's the thing that should make your blood run cold. He's not plotting escape or nursing secret hatred. He's genuinely, completely happy. This isn't someone pretending to be reformed while secretly maintaining their inner rebellion. This is someone who has been fundamentally rewired at the level of consciousness itself. Think about what this means for a moment. We've all had experiences where we've had to bite our tongue, where we've had to smile and nod when we disagreed with something. Maybe it was at work or with family or in some social situation where speaking our truth would have cost us too much. But even in those moments, we knew we were performing. We maintained that inner sanctuary where our real thoughts lived. Winston no longer has that sanctuary. It's been completely demolished and rebuilt in the party's image. When Winston hears about Oceania's victory in Africa, he feels genuine joy and pride. This isn't the hollow enthusiasm of someone going through the motions, it's the real thing. And that's what makes it so terrifying. The party hasn't just broken his will, they've rebuilt his very capacity for feeling. It's like they've performed surgery on his soul, removing the parts that were authentically his and replacing them with party-approved emotions. Now you might be thinking, this is just a dystopian fantasy, right? This kind of total psychological transformation couldn't really happen. But consider how we see echoes of this in our own world. Think about how social media algorithms gradually shape what we see, and consequently, what we think about. Think about how advertising doesn't just try to sell us products, but actually reshapes our desires and values. Think about how political propaganda, when we're exposed to it constantly, can slowly shift our perception of reality itself. The difference is one of degree and method, but the fundamental principle is the same. Our thoughts and feelings aren't as independent as we like to believe. They're shaped by our environment, by what we're exposed to, by the rewards and punishments we experience. The party in 1984 has simply perfected this process and made it absolute. What's particularly heartbreaking is that Winston remembers loving Julia, but that memory no longer has any emotional weight for him. It's like remembering that you once liked a food that now disgusts you. The memory is there, but it feels alien, disconnected from who you are now. The party hasn't erased his memories. They've severed the emotional connections that made those memories meaningful. In many ways, this is crueler than simple amnesia. Winston knows what he's lost, but he can no longer feel the loss. And then comes that final, devastating line. He loved Big Brother. These 4 words represent the complete victory of the party, not just over Winston's actions or even his thoughts, but over his very capacity for authentic emotion. The man who began this story with a desperate hunger for truth and genuine human connection now feels nothing but love for the system that destroyed him. This ending forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about the nature of the self. What makes you you? Is it your memories, your values, your relationships, your ability to think independently? Orwell suggests that all of these can be altered, and when they are, what remains? Is there some essential core of identity that can't be touched, or are we more malleable than we want to admit? In our current era of information overload and digital manipulation, these questions feel more relevant than ever. We live in a time when our attention is constantly being fought over, when algorithms know us better than we know ourselves, when the line between authentic opinion and manufactured consent becomes increasingly blurred. We may not face Room 101, but we face subtler forms of psychological manipulation every day. The genius of Orwell's ending is that it doesn't offer false hope or easy answers. Winston isn't rescued. There's no underground resistance that swoops in to save him. There's no moment of redemption where he recovers his humanity. The party wins, completely and utterly, and that victory is so total that Winston himself celebrates it. This isn't just a story about totalitarian government. It's a story about the fragility of human consciousness itself. It reminds us that our thoughts, our feelings, our very sense of self are not as solid and permanent as we might hope. They require protection, cultivation, and constant vigilance to maintain. As we close this chapter and this remarkable, disturbing book, we're left not with answers but with warnings. Orwell has shown us a possible future, and while we may not live under Big Brother's watchful eye, We can certainly recognize the seeds of that future in our present moment. The question isn't whether such a world is possible. The question is what we're willing to do to prevent it. Picture yourself settling into your favorite chair with that perfect cup of coffee, steam rising gently as we dive into one of the most chilling yet brilliant explorations of power ever written. George Orwell's 1984 doesn't just tell us a story about Winston Smith and his doomed rebellion against Big Brother. At its heart, it's a masterclass in understanding how power actually works, how it corrupts, and why those who seek it will go to unimaginable lengths to keep it. Now think about this for a moment. When most of us consider power, we imagine it as something concrete, measurable. We think about military might, economic control, or political influence. But Orwell understood something far more sinister and sophisticated. In the world of 1984, the party doesn't just want to control what you do or even what you say. They want to control what you think, what you remember, and ultimately, what you believe is real. This isn't just authoritarianism taken to an extreme. This is power in its purest, most terrifying form. O'Brien, that smooth-talking inner party member who becomes Winston's torturer, delivers one of the most bone-chilling explanations of power ever put to paper. He tells Winston that the party seeks power entirely for its own sake, not for any noble purpose or greater good. Think about that conversation in room 101, where O'Brien explains that they don't torture people to extract confessions or information. They torture people to demonstrate power, to show that they can break the human spirit completely and remake it in their own image. This brings us to something absolutely crucial that Orwell understood about human nature. Power doesn't just corrupt the person wielding it. It fundamentally changes the relationship between the powerful and the powerless. When O'Brien forces Winston to look at himself in the mirror after months of torture, Winston sees a broken shell of a man. But here's the truly devastating part. O'Brien has convinced Winston that this destruction was necessary, even merciful. The victim thanks his torturer. Now that's power. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. We might not have telescreens monitoring our every move, but think about how social media algorithms shape what we see, what we believe, and even how we feel about ourselves. These platforms don't just show us content. They create our reality by deciding what information reaches us. When a tech company can influence elections, shape public opinion, or determine which small businesses succeed or fail, aren't they exercising the kind of power Orwell warned us about? The party in 1984 perfected what we might call the psychology of power. They understood that true control comes not from fear alone, but from making people complicit in their own oppression. Doublethink, that ability to hold two contradictory beliefs simultaneously, isn't just a fictional concept. We see it everywhere today. People who claim to value privacy while voluntarily sharing their most intimate details online. Citizens who demand government accountability while accepting increasingly invasive surveillance in the name of security. Workers who celebrate corporate success while their own wages stagnate. But here's where Orwell's insight becomes truly profound. The party doesn't just want obedience, they want love. Winston's journey from rebellion to complete submission isn't complete until he genuinely loves Big Brother. This isn't Stockholm Syndrome we're talking about. This is the systematic destruction and reconstruction of human consciousness. O'Brien explains that they don't destroy their enemies, they convert them. They make them into willing participants in the very system that oppresses them. Think about the brilliance of this approach. Physical force is expensive and temporary. You can occupy a country with tanks and soldiers, but that requires constant vigilance and resources. True power is when people police themselves, when they internalize the values of their oppressors so completely that external force becomes unnecessary. When citizens report on their neighbors not because they're forced to, but because they genuinely believe it's the right thing to do. This connects to something we see playing out in real time across the globe. Authoritarian movements don't typically succeed through violent coups anymore. They win through democratic processes, convincing people to vote away their own freedoms. They create an us versus them mentality where questioning the leader becomes tantamount to betraying the group. They flood the information environment with so much noise that truth becomes impossible to discern, making people dependent on the authority figure to tell them what's real. Orwell understood that the ultimate expression of power is the ability to define reality itself. When the party declares that 2 + 2 = 5, they're not making a mathematical statement. They're demonstrating that they control the very foundation of rational thought. They can make people believe anything, no matter how absurd, because they've destroyed the individual's capacity for independent reasoning. The practical wisdom here cuts deep into our daily lives. Every time we accept convenient lies over uncomfortable truths, every time we choose tribal loyalty over personal integrity, every time we surrender our critical thinking to charismatic leaders or popular movements, we're participating in the same dynamic that destroys Winston Smith. The power to control reality doesn't require telescreens or thought police when people willingly surrender their minds. As we close this exploration of power's darkest manifestations, remember that Orwell wrote 1984 not as a prediction, but as a warning. Understanding how power operates in its most extreme form helps us recognize its subtle manifestations in our own world, making us better equipped to preserve the freedoms we often take for granted. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop scrolling through your phone when suddenly you realize that every website you visit, every product you search for, every video you watch is being tracked, analyzed, and used to predict your next move. That targeted ad for the exact shoes you were thinking about buying yesterday. That's not coincidence, my friend. Welcome to our modern glimpse into what Orwell was warning us about in 1984, where the line between freedom and control becomes so blurred that we might not even notice when we've crossed it. When Orwell wrote about Winston Smith's world, he was painting a picture of a society where freedom had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, until what remained was merely the illusion of choice. Think about Winston standing in that little alcove in his apartment, the one spot where the telescreen couldn't see him, desperately trying to write in his forbidden diary. That tiny space represents something profound about human nature, our desperate need for authentic freedom, even if it's just a few square feet of mental privacy. But here's what's really chilling about Orwell's vision and why it resonates so powerfully today. The party in 1984 doesn't just control what people do, they control what people think is real. When O'Brien holds up 4 fingers and demands that Winston see 5, he's not just playing a cruel game. He's demonstrating the ultimate form of control, the power to define reality itself. Now, think about this for a moment. How different is that from our current information landscape, where different groups of people can look at the exact same event and come away with completely contradictory understandings of what happened? Winston's journey toward understanding freedom is like watching someone slowly wake up from a dream, only to realize that waking up might be the most dangerous thing he could do. Remember that moment when he first sees Julia and thinks he hates her because she represents everything pure and good that he can't have. Then later, when she slips him that note saying, "I love you," his entire world shifts. Suddenly, the possibility of genuine human connection, of real choice, of authentic feeling, breaks through the gray monotony of his controlled existence. The love affair between Winston and Julia becomes a powerful metaphor for what true freedom actually means. It's not just about being able to do whatever you want. It's about being able to form genuine connections, to experience authentic emotions, to make choices that come from your own heart rather than from programming or conditioning. When they meet in that hidden room above Mr. Charrington's shop, surrounded by forbidden luxuries like real coffee and white bread, they're not just having an affair. They're reclaiming their humanity. But Orwell is too wise a writer to let us believe that personal rebellion alone is enough. The room where Winston and Julia think they've found freedom turns out to be another trap, another layer of the party's control. Mr. Charrington, the kindly old shopkeeper who seemed to represent a connection to the past, reveals himself as a member of the thought police. Even their most private moments, their most intimate expressions of love and rebellion, were being watched and catalogued. This is where Orwell's insight becomes almost unbearably relevant to our modern world. How many of us have had the experience of having a private conversation about a product, only to see ads for that exact item appearing on our social media feeds? How many times have we felt like our phones are listening to us, watching us, learning our patterns? The technology that was science fiction in Orwell's time has become the mundane reality of our daily lives. The telescreens in 1984 were always watching, always listening, but they were obviously intrusive. Our modern surveillance is far more seductive. We carry our telescreens willingly in our pockets. We invite them into our homes as smart speakers and connected devices. We trade our privacy for convenience, our autonomy for personalization, often without even realizing we're making that trade. Winston's final defeat in Room 101, when he betrays Julia to save himself from his worst fear, represents the complete destruction of authentic freedom. When someone can manipulate your deepest fears and loves, when they can rewire your very capacity for human connection, what's left of free will? O'Brien's famous declaration that "we shall meet in the place where there is no darkness" turns out to be literally true, but not in the way Winston hoped. The place where there is no darkness is the place where all secrets are exposed, all privacy is eliminated, all authentic choice is destroyed. Yet even in this bleakest of visions, Orwell leaves us with something important to consider. The very fact that Winston could rebel, even temporarily, suggests that the human spirit has something in it that resists total control. The proles, largely ignored by the party because they're considered harmless, maintain a kind of unconscious freedom through their very indifference to politics and ideology. As we close this reflection on freedom and reality in Orwell's masterpiece, consider this. Perhaps the most important freedom is the freedom to recognize when we're not free. The ability to step back, like Winston in his hidden alcove, and honestly examine the forces shaping our thoughts, our choices, our understanding of reality itself. Because in a world where the very nature of truth is under constant assault, that small space of genuine reflection might be the most radical act of all. Picture this. You're sitting in the deepest, darkest cave imaginable, and someone tells you there's no way out. But then, just as your eyes adjust to the darkness, you notice the faintest glimmer of light filtering through a crack in the rock. That's essentially what George Orwell gives us in 1984, a masterpiece that's simultaneously one of the bleakest and most hopeful books ever written. Now, I know that sounds contradictory, but stay with me here, because understanding this paradox is crucial to grasping why this novel continues to resonate so powerfully with readers decades after its publication. When most people think about 1984, they focus on the nightmare, Big Brother watching, thought police prowling, the crushing weight of totalitarian control. And yes, Orwell paints a world so suffocating that it makes your worst Monday morning feel like a tropical vacation. But here's what's fascinating. Embedded within this dystopian hellscape are some of the most profound statements about human resilience and the indestructible nature of the human spirit that literature has ever offered. Think about Winston's simple act of writing in his diary. On the surface, it's just a man scribbling words on paper, but Orwell transforms this mundane action into something revolutionary. Every pen stroke becomes an act of rebellion, every private thought a declaration of independence. Now, think about this in our current context. How many times do we express ourselves online, knowing full well that our digital footprints are being tracked and stored? Winston's diary isn't just a relic from a fictional past. It's a mirror reflecting our own struggles to maintain authentic self-expression in an age of surveillance capitalism. The relationship between Winston and Julia offers another beacon of hope within the darkness. Their love affair isn't just about romance. It's about two people refusing to let an oppressive system dictate the most intimate aspects of their humanity. When they meet in that clearing in the woods, surrounded by nature that the party cannot fully control, Orwell shows us something profound. Even in the most controlled society imaginable, human connection finds a way. It reminds me of stories from actual totalitarian regimes, where couples would communicate through coded letters or secret glances across crowded rooms. Love, Orwell suggests, is perhaps the ultimate form of resistance because it's inherently personal and therefore inherently free. But let's dig deeper into what might be Orwell's most subtle yet powerful message of hope, the very existence of the book itself. Consider this: we're reading Winston's story, which means someone somewhere managed to preserve and transmit this narrative of resistance. The novel becomes its own proof that truth cannot be completely erased. It's like those time capsules people bury, hoping future generations will discover them. Orwell is essentially burying a time capsule of human consciousness, demonstrating that even if the party rewrites history, the human capacity to remember and record truth persists. The character of the old prole in the pub represents another fascinating thread of hope. Here's a man who lived before the party's rise to power, carrying memories that predate their manufactured reality. He can't articulate the grand political implications of what he's witnessed, but he remembers real things: the taste of beer, the feeling of genuine emotions, the texture of authentic human experience. Orwell seems to be saying that while intellectual resistance might be crushed, sensory memory and emotional truth have a way of persisting in the most unexpected places. It's similar to how elderly people today carry memories of a pre-digital world, serving as living repositories of different ways of being human. Now think about this. Even O'Brien, the novel's most chilling antagonist, inadvertently affirms the power of hope. Why else would the party need such elaborate systems of control? Why Room 101? Why the constant surveillance and thought policing? The very existence of these mechanisms suggests that without them, people would naturally gravitate toward freedom, love, and truth. It's like a dam that requires constant maintenance. The pressure it's holding back reveals the immense force of what it's trying to contain. The concept of doublethink, while terrifying, also contains a hidden message about human cognitive resilience. The fact that people can hold contradictory thoughts simultaneously suggests an incredible mental flexibility. While the party exploits this capacity for oppression, it also implies that human consciousness is far more complex and adaptable than any system trying to control it. We see this today in how people navigate social media, maintaining authentic private selves while presenting curated public personas, demonstrating that same cognitive dexterity Orwell identified. Perhaps most importantly, Orwell's appendix about Newspeak is written in past tense, suggesting that this oppressive language eventually failed. It's a brilliant narrative trick that implies the party's ultimate defeat without explicitly stating it. The very fact that we can read about Newspeak in standard English suggests that human language, and by extension, human thought, proved unconquerable. As we close this exploration of hope within despair, remember that 1984 isn't just a warning. It's also a testament to the human spirit's remarkable persistence. Every act of reading, every moment of critical thinking, every genuine connection we make with another person echoes Winston's small rebellions. The book's enduring popularity itself proves Orwell's point. Truth and human dignity have a way of surviving even the most determined attempts to destroy them. And that, my friends, is perhaps the most hopeful message of all. George Orwell's 1984 is a profound exploration of totalitarianism, individuality, and the power of language and thought. Through the harrowing experiences of Winston Smith, we dive into a world where Big Brother watches, truth is malleable, and freedom is a distant memory. The novel serves as a stark warning of the dangers of unchecked power and the fragility of personal freedom. Here are some key takeaways that resonate with us today. 1. Guard your liberty. In a society where surveillance is omnipresent, the value of personal liberty cannot be overstated. Practically, this means staying informed and critically analyzing the information we consume. Start by questioning the sources of your news and engaging in conversations about privacy rights. 2. The power of language. Orwell reminds us that language shapes thought. Pay attention to the words you use and how they frame your reality. Begin by journaling daily to reflect on how your language might be influencing your mindset, and be patient with yourself as you develop a more positive inner dialogue. 3. Challenge the status quo. Winston's struggle is a testament to the importance of questioning authority. In your own life, this can mean asking questions in meetings or proposing new ideas, even when it feels uncomfortable. Remember, start incredibly small, such as by voicing a single question or thought daily. 4. Resilience of the human spirit. Despite overwhelming odds, Winston's initial resistance highlights the indomitable nature of the human spirit. Cultivate resilience by setting small, achievable goals and celebrating each victory. Be patient with yourself as you strengthen your resolve. By understanding these themes, we not only grasp the depth of Orwell's dystopian vision, but also find ourselves better equipped to navigate the complexities of our own world. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.